Dad screamed, "You're the biggest failure this family ever produced." Mom snapped, "We should have left you at the hospital." I fixed my collar and said, "Then I'll stop being your aim." I walked out. 30 minutes later my phone lit up, 52 missed calls and a voicemail full of pleading. Dad slammed his hand on the table and shouted it so loud I felt it in my chest. "You're the biggest failure this family ever produced." I didn't even get a chance to respond before Mom jumped in and said they should have left me at the hospital. That they actually talked about it and regretted not going through with it. It wasn't said in anger. It was calculated. Almost rehearsed. They meant it. I was standing in the living room with an envelope in my hand, a check for $1,200 I'd written to help them cover their overdue electric and gas bills. Second time in 3 months. I hadn't even sat down. I hadn't even taken off my shoes. The fight started when I told them I couldn't do it anymore. That I had my own bills and I'd already pulled from my emergency savings to bail them out the last time. I thought maybe they'd be frustrated. Maybe there'd be some guilt. But instead I got told I was a failure and a mistake. The worst part is that it didn't even surprise me. This wasn't a new thing. It wasn't even out of character. They'd been saying versions of it my whole life, just wrapped in nicer words. When I was 9 it was, "Why can't you be more like your cousins?" When I was 17 it was, "Don't expect us to pay for college, we didn't ask you to be born." When I was 22 and landed my first job, it was, "Finally, you're not completely useless." It was always layered with fake laughs and "we're just joking," but it chipped away at me over the years like water on stone. I slid the check back into my bag. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't say some dramatic final line. I just told them one thing before I walked out. "Then I'll stop being your aim." I didn't even slam the door. Just got in my car and drove off. My hands were shaking the whole way home, but it wasn't from sadness. It was like I'd just woken up from a long, strange dream where I'd convinced myself these people were family. I made it back to my apartment, sat in the car for a bit with the engine running. My phone was still on silent from earlier, but I noticed the screen was glowing. 52 missed calls. Then a voicemail. I didn't want to hear it, but I listened anyway. It was Mom. She sounded panicked. Kept saying they didn't mean it. That they were stressed. That I was being sensitive. That it was just a bad joke. I could hear Dad in the background saying something I couldn't quite make out. I didn't care anymore. They'd said what they'd always wanted to say. I'd finally heard it clearly and there was no unhearing it. What I did next wasn't out of spite. I opened my banking app and canceled the auto transfer I'd set up for them last year. They wouldn't notice right away, but they'd feel it soon enough. I also canceled the card I let them use, just for groceries. That was their favorite lie. I blocked their numbers. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I made dinner. Watched a show I didn't pay attention to. Went to bed early. But at 2:34 a.m. I sat straight up in bed, wide awake. And I realized I wasn't scared of what would happen next. I was free. The silence lasted about 2 days. 2 peaceful, quiet days. I didn't check my email. I kept their numbers blocked. I went to work, came home, cooked, and finally breathed like a person who wasn't being drained alive. Then the noise started again. First it was my aunt texting me from a number I didn't recognize, asking why I was being dramatic. Said I needed to remember where I came from. I blocked her. Then it was my dad's coworker, some guy I barely remembered from a barbecue 3 years ago, messaging me on Facebook to say, "Families fight but blood is blood." Blocked again. Then came the email. My mom wrote me a full page, no subject line. Said they were under pressure, and I should try to understand what it's like to have real responsibilities. She said I was ungrateful and selfish. That I was raised better. That they'd sacrificed everything for me. I read the whole thing twice. Not once did she apologize. She just kept circling around how much money I'd given them, like it had stopped being a gift and turned into a job I'd abandoned. But it was the last sentence that really cracked something open. She wrote, "Your grandmother always spoiled you. You're not her only grandchild. Maybe she should be helping everyone, not just you." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called Grandma. She answered like she always did, like she'd been waiting. I asked her if anyone had been calling her lately. She sighed. Said yes. Said my mom had asked her for a loan, and when she hesitated, Mom told her that if she wouldn't help her own daughter, she could forget about seeing me anymore. I didn't even know what to say. I asked Grandma what she told her. She laughed. Not in a cheerful way. Just tired. Said she told my mom that I was the only reason she was even speaking to her at all. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Grace, if you hadn't cut them off, I was about to. You just beat me to it." Turns out Grandma had been helping them too. Quietly. Little things. Groceries. Gas money. Even paid their internet 1 month when I was out of town. He did it for me, not for them. He said they were never kind. Not to me. Not to her either. Just needy. I sat there on the phone for a long time after she hung up, holding it against my ear, listening to the dial tone. Everything I thought was mine. My family, my loyalty, my responsibility. None of it had been real. It had been a leash and I'd worn it like a necklace. That night, I got a text from an unknown number with a screenshot of a GoFundMe. Title: Helping Our Family Recover After a Tragic Abandonment. They were trying to raise $15,000. The description said their daughter had turned her back on them after years of abuse and control, that they'd sacrificed everything to support her ungrateful ambitions, and now they were on the verge of losing everything. There were baby photos of me on the page. I didn't even know what emotion hit me first. Anger? Disgust? Or maybe it was just disbelief that they'd stoop so low so publicly. I forwarded the link to Grandma. She replied 2 minutes later. "I'll take care of it." Grandma kept her word. By the next morning, the GoFundMe was gone. I don't know exactly what she said or who she contacted, but the link started returning a 404-page not found error. I figured that was the end of it. But screenshots live forever. By noon, I'd already gotten 2 emails from college friends I hadn't spoken to in years, both asking if everything was okay at home. Someone from high school messaged me a link to a Reddit post that had been shared in a family drama forum. My face was in it. So was my name. So was the fake story. They painted me like I'd gone no contact because they refused to keep funding some reckless lifestyle. Claimed they'd mortgaged the house to keep me in school, and that I abandoned them the second I got rich. Rich? I was a mid-level project coordinator with student loans and a leaking bathroom ceiling. But I guess in their eyes, the fact that I wasn't drowning meant I was some cold, detached Silicon Valley monster. I don't know how they thought this would play out. Maybe they thought I'd see it, panic, and call them. Maybe they wanted pity. Maybe it was just revenge. I tried not to care. I tried to be above it. But it was getting harder. That night, Grandma called me again. Said someone had been leaving voicemails on her landline every hour. I asked her if she wanted me to talk to them, but she said no. Then she told me something that made my stomach turn. Someone had donated $500 to the fundraiser before it got taken down. She checked the archived version of the page before it disappeared. The name was listed as Kelsey D. Kelsey is my little sister. She moved out when she was 18 and joined the military. Never looked back. We were never close growing up. She was younger, quieter, and Mom always pitted us against each other like it was a game. We reconnected a bit in our 20s, met for lunch a few times when she was on leave. But I hadn't heard from her in almost a year. I didn't know what to do with that information. I thought maybe she'd been tricked. Maybe she didn't know what the fundraiser was really about. I told myself that until I messaged her. I kept it short. Just asked if she donated to that fundraiser Mom posted. She replied an hour later. "Yeah, I did. They told me you cut them off and left them broke." What was I supposed to do? No apology. No question. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Typed something out. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. Then she sent another message. "You always acted like you were better than them. Maybe this time you really are. Congrats." That one hit harder than the first. I showed Grandma the messages. She told me something she hadn't mentioned before. Apparently, Kelsey had been in contact with my parents this whole time. More than I knew. She never gave them money, not until now, but she'd always defended them. Always found a way to make excuses. Grandma told me not to waste time trying to fix it. Said some people choose their side and stay there no matter what they see. But the truth is, I wasn't angry at Kelsey. I was just tired. Tired of pretending these people had ever been anything but one long chain of obligation and emotional blackmail. It's one thing to be hurt. It's another thing to know they'll use your hurt as a story to sell to strangers online. I decided to take time off work. Just a few days. I told my boss I needed space from everything. He didn't ask questions. Grandma offered to let me stay at her place for a while. Said we could sit on the porch, drink bad coffee, and not talk about anything if that's what I needed. I packed a bag that night, left my phone charging in the kitchen and crawled into bed. At 3:12 a.m. I woke up to a banging sound. Someone was at my front door. I froze. My heart jumped into my throat. Then I heard a voice. My father. Calling my name. I stayed frozen for a few seconds trying to figure out if I was dreaming. I wasn't. I heard it again. A knock louder this time. Then his voice. Grace. Open the door. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound apologetic either. He just sounded tired. I slipped out of bed and stood in the hallway staring at the door like it was going to break open. I didn't move. Didn't say a word. He knocked again. For sharp knocks like he was trying to remind me who he used to be in that house. Then came the one sentence that made my hands curl into fist. You don't get to cut us off and hide. We need to talk. Need. That was always the word with them. Always wrapped in some variation of help us, pay this, fix that. Never want talk. Never sorry. Just need. I stood still and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally I heard footsteps. But not away from the door. Around the side of the building. I moved to the window by the kitchen and peeked through the blinds. There he was standing near the edge of the porch, phone in hand, pacing. And next to him, Kelsey. She looked different. Skinnier than I remembered, tired. But she was here, arms crossed, jaw set like she was forcing herself to be here. He was talking to her now, not me. She said something and pointed back at the car. He shook his head and handed her the phone. Then she started calling me. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter. 5 calls in a row, one after the other. I didn't answer. Then came a text. Grace. Please. He won't leave until you talk to him. I still didn't move. 5 minutes later, another knock. Not as loud this time. I walked up to the door quietly and for whatever reason I said something through it. Just 2 words. Go away. Silence. Then my dad's voice again. You're going to ruin everything over a few harsh words? I almost laughed. I almost opened the door just to ask him what he thought ruined meant. As if everything that came before this had been some healthy, functioning relationship. I didn't say anything else. Eventually I watched them walk back to the car. My dad opened the driver's side, but Kelsey just stood there for a second, facing the house. I saw her look up toward my window. She couldn't see me, I'd already backed into the shadows. Then she got in and they drove off. I stayed up the rest of the night. Packed a few more things. By sunrise I was halfway to Grandma's. She lived 2 hours out in a small town that barely had cell reception and ran on diner coffee and good gossip. When I pulled up she was already waiting on the porch in a bathrobe and sneakers, holding 2 mugs. She didn't ask questions. Just handed me one and said the guest room was made up. I stayed for 4 days. Didn't check my phone once. We didn't talk about my parents or Kelsey. Not at first. It wasn't until the 3rd night while we were watching some awful baking competition on cable, that Grandma turned the volume down and told me something I didn't know I needed to hear. She said she'd been waiting years for me to do what I did. That she'd watched them drain me slowly. That when I was little she used to argue with them about how they treated me, but it always ended with her being shut out. She said she only stayed close because of me. That shook me more than anything. Because all this time I thought I was the only one who noticed. I thought I was the one holding everything together. But Grandma had known. She'd just been waiting for me to see it too. That night I checked my phone again for the first time. There were more missed calls, mostly from unknown numbers now. A new GoFundMe had been created. Less dramatic this time. Titled Rebuilding After Family Estrangement. No names, no baby pictures. But I knew who it was. I knew who it was about. And the donation list? It had started filling up again. This time with names I recognized. My old piano teacher. My ex's mom. A neighbor from my childhood street. All people who thought they knew our family. All people who had no idea. But what really got me was at the bottom of the list. A $1,000 donation. No message. The name listed, Emma D. Emma was my mother's sister. The one who disappeared from family gatherings over a decade ago. The one nobody talked about anymore. I hadn't seen her since I was 12. And now she was back. I stared at the name on the donation list for a long time. Emma D. It couldn't be a coincidence. Not with that name. Not with that amount. I remembered her barely. She used to braid my hair when I was a kid. She was the only one who ever brought real gifts to birthdays. Ones she'd actually picked out herself. And then one year she just stopped showing up. When I asked where she went, my mom would snap. She made her choice, and that was the end of the conversation. Dad didn't say anything at all. I opened a private tab and searched her name. Nothing useful at first. Some old work listings and outdated Facebook profile. But then I found a LinkedIn page that hadn't been updated in years. So it had an email. I didn't know what I expected. Probably nothing. But I sent something anyway. Short. Just said, "Are you my Aunt Emma? If so, I think we need to talk." She replied 2 hours later. Yes. And I've been waiting for this. I didn't tell Grandma about it right away. I wasn't sure if she even knew what happened between them. All I knew was Emma was real, alive, and she wanted to meet. We agreed to talk over video first. I had to drive 10 miles out of town just to get enough signal to make the call. I sat in my car parked outside a gas station and waited. When she picked up, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, of course. Deeper lines, gray streaks in her hair. But her eyes were the same. She didn't waste time. Said she'd seen the fundraiser. Said she donated because she knew it wasn't about helping anyone. It was about control. Said she'd seen the same thing happen years ago. To her. She left when she was 24. My mom turned the family against her. Spun a story that made her sound unstable, dangerous even. Told people she had stolen money from their parents. When really, Emma said she refused to hand over her inheritance to cover Dad's debts. She showed me receipts. Emails. Scans of old letters, bank statements, even a voicemail she saved from 2006 where my mother accused her of ruining everything. I couldn't stop shaking. Everything she said lined up. The patterns, the guilt trips, the way they acted like I owed them something just for existing. She'd lived it first. He said something else too. Something that flipped everything upside down. He told me about the house. The house my parents were living in wasn't theirs. It was Grandma's. Wiggly. She had transferred it to her name years ago because they were drowning in debt and on the verge of losing it. She didn't just help them. She saved them. Quietly, without telling me. And now, after everything, they were threatening to sell it behind her back. Grandma had suspected something was off when random appraisers started showing up claiming the house was on the market. She confronted my mom, who claimed it was just a misunderstanding. But now it was clear. They were trying to forge documents. I ended the call with Emma and drove straight back to Grandma's. I told her everything. The donation. The appraisers. The title. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded and went to her bedroom. 10 minutes later, she came out holding a metal lockbox. Inside were all the original documents. The deed. Notarized. Untouched. She said, "If they want to play games, then let's play." And that's when she made the call. To her lawyer. The next morning, she started the process of evicting them. They had 30 days. The papers were served 3 days later. My dad called from a new number. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail calling me a traitor, saying I'd turned my grandmother against her own children. That I'd destroyed the family. But the truth was, the family had already been ashes. I just stopped pretending it was still breathing. Mom didn't call. She sent a single text. "We hope you're happy." I didn't respond. The eviction went through faster than I expected. Turns out, when you've lied to appraisers and faked ownership documents, people stop defending you. They left the house bitter and loud. Grandma stayed quiet through all of it. Kelsey didn't show up. I don't know where she went. Emma came to visit 2 weeks later. For the first time in 15 years, she stood in the house she grew up in, hugged her mother, and looked at me like she recognized someone in the mirror. We had dinner. The three of us. No guilt. No tension. No performance. I didn't get justice. Not really. But I got truth. And I got peace.